Welcome to American Legal System, Political Science 67, a very short introduction. This is your professor, Jason Leggett. The theme of this course has been under the framework of law and society, which is an area of focus within the discipline of political science. This believes that legal institutions can best be understood by documenting and analyzing the gap between law in the books and law in action within social contexts through systematic comparison and critical judgment. I encourage you to look at issues in your community, whether they be stop and frisk, issues like gentrification, or issues that are more popular in the mainstream, like the two examples that I've provided here. You should keep in mind that while the law is written in books, such as the Constitution, it's also written in statutes, which are created by legislatures or politicians. This means that the people who have to authorize or enforce the law, whether that be the president, the governor, or the police department, are going to do those with human mistakes. We want to investigate the difference between the law as we wish it to be, or in the ideal, and the law as the way it is practiced among our citizens and non-citizens alike. It's through this comparison that we can have a better understanding of how we can improve our institutions or how we can amend our laws. At the very least, I would hope that you would leave this class with your own answer to what is the American legal system. Let me explain a few of these major points that are in this paragraph that you should definitely spend time reading in preparation for your final exam. We want to remember that the rule of law is not a unique American concept, but has been part of the Western tradition for thousands of years. The main idea of the rule of law is that you, as a member of society, cannot be discriminated against by the arbitrary, meaning without reason, action of a single individual. In other words, we've all agreed to withhold our own feelings, opinions, and actions in any given circumstance while we're in society in order to be judged by the law. You should remember from your Intro to Criminal Justice class that laws, put simply, are society agreed upon norms. That means there's going to be lots of areas in which people disagree, have different interpretations of these norms, but also that some of the things that you hold important or true may not be things that have been written down into the legal code. Most of the time, these kind of issues are taken through the courts under what is called the common law, which derives mostly from the British system. It's important to remember, though, that whether the laws themselves are fair, that everyone believes that the way that they are enforced, executed, and tried in court is fair. We know that's not always the case, and we want to be able to examine where these are not fair to see what we can learn. But this can be a particularly difficult task for people who have had negative experiences with the law, with police, or with the criminal justice system in general. This is difficult beyond just the psychological or emotional point of view, but also because it's very difficult to see what's called the forest when you're staring at the trees. This means that as a class, we have to be able to rise above what we think the American legal system is, or the way it operates, and to be able to analyze it to see what we can learn from our personal experience in comparison or contrast to what others see. This means that you have to be able to see the legal system from multiple points of view. This goes beyond just a prosecutor or a criminal defense lawyer or a judge or a bailiff. You also have to see the way that these institutions are designed and how different people have different influences over them. For example, you need to understand the American legal system is not a single system, but that it varies from state to state, which means that there are 50 different state legal systems. But there are also local systems. A good example that you're probably aware of would be the rules and regulations on the MTA. But there's also larger federal laws like the United States Constitution, but also regulations that come from the federal government, but also international law. All of these laws have different effects and are practiced in different ways. You should also know that the American legal system does not just cover criminal, but it also covers civil law. Both of these come from the Old English common law, but have been interpreted and applied very differently. For example, the civil law really does come first, and that law, including contracts, property, and torts, is really about your ability to pursue happiness through property in the American system. It follows then that the criminal system is going to follow many of the same beliefs, including those of the rule of law, that the civil law system does. To best understand this system then, you're going to have to be able to analyze it from more than one point of view. I've provided to you a case study about an undocumented immigrant that was deported by a private hospital. This is part of my academic and scholarly research, which I am required to do as a professor. I thought it would be helpful to bring it into the class so that you could see an example of how this kind of research is done, how it affects and is applied to the criminal justice system generally, but also to see the nature of the global rule of law, as well as global issues in general. We also have the opportunity to look at different areas of the law, such as criminal law, immigration, torts or health law, and international and human rights law. While there are many additional areas of law, for instance, tax law, these are definitely issues that you would face or different aspects of the law that you would encounter as you continue in your studies. I hope that you also take the time to further investigate these areas of law in accordance to your personal, academic, and career interests. You should read the chart here, but you should understand that I've given you kind of two ideas within each set of points of view of the legal system. The first idea is just a basic situation that many people or most people who are affected by that area of law or who practice in that area of law come to encounter. The row below that, or the second idea, really investigates law as ideal, or the law that's on the books. I hope that the one thing you've been able to see is that sometimes there's a very large difference between the law in the books and law in reality, as was the case study and is often the case in immigration law. But that in many ways, you can see that in criminal law and tort law, specifically in the area of healthcare, you see that the government, through the criminal justice system and the political system, are making efforts to reform these areas to better meet the needs of the people in criminal and healthcare law, but also to make that gap a little bit smaller so that we're getting closer to the goals of the Constitution and the American legal system. As I hope that you discovered when you did the reading areas of law in the academy, one of the principal goals of our kind of job as both students, scholars, researchers, and just thinkers about the American legal system is to have some kind of positive impact on the study of law and the criminal justice system at large. My research over the last few years about this particular individual that represents a much larger issue in both the American and inter-American systems led me to ask this question about how people might perceive the rule of law in New York. Over the last 2 years, students have conducted research, including interviews and documenting where different socio-legal services are available within their communities. What we have discovered is that perceptions, particularly among identifiable immigrant groups, vary about the fairness of the rule of law in New York City based on whether they have been able to get access or have equal access to these services that are all a part of the citizenship that we all take for granted, or that we don't get the way that we want them. I hope that through your own research, through your readings in this class, and through your efforts in your different civic engagement activities, that you've been able to come up with a question as well about the criminal justice system. And please share that with me. My effort through the Brooklyn Public Scholars Project, as well as Bridging Cultures to Form a Nation, has been to give you opportunities to really get into these issues yourself. What I've learned so far is that examining law in practice in all of our communities has strengthened our knowledge of socio-legal issues and public legal education in different cultural groups in different ways across New York City. For example, one student has been working with me over the last year to help bring workshops to New York public libraries starting in East New York. We've been looking at the issue of food stamps, farmers markets, and also gun violence. This research has now expanded into Flatbush and Canarsie. By next year, we hope to have created a civic learning community map that identifies the gaps in socio-legal services throughout New York City. If you're interested in participating, or if you have comments or questions, please feel free to let me know. In general, I wanted you to see, as indicated on the example provided, that how we define community, democratic thinking, and diversity greatly enhance or limit how we see civic engagement and civic learning. I challenge you to redefine your idea of community based on criminal justice issues within your community, and think about who you could partner with to bring solutions using the knowledge that you've gained not just from this class, but from your experience at Kingsborough in the criminal justice program. By the end of this course, I really hope that you can critically analyze the participants, procedures, and specific steps of the legal system. The participants are the ones that you usually think of: the lawyers, the accused, the victims, the jury, the judge, the bailiff, and the appellate courts. But it's important that you also look at the procedures, because many times, for example, when drugs or weapons are seized improperly by police officers in violation of the Fourth Amendment, such as in stop and frisk, oftentimes that evidence is dismissed by the judge. Whether the lawyer knows how to accurately and effectively use these procedures very much determines the outcome of the case. You should also be familiar with the specific steps of the legal system, mainly because there's a lot that happens before a case might go to trial. For example, in New York, there are different steps than there are in other states. It's best if you familiarize yourself at the federal level because you'll remember that local and city and state governments can never conflict with the United States Constitution. But whether you do these steps in the correct order very much determines whether your case gets in, for instance, in civil cases, like when you sue or get sued, that case may get thrown out because you failed to follow the steps. Additionally, in criminal cases, issues like the chain of custody or whether evidence was handled properly or had unfavorable motives, as in the O.J. Simpson case, you will see that that greatly determines what's allowed in court and what could be presented to the jury or what might not be. I want you to understand this in the significance of the rule of law, because in many societies, even including European ones, there isn't the same levels of discovery, of evidence, or of logical reasoning. All of these are extremely important to our beliefs in the legitimacy and effectiveness of the legal system. So it's important for you to not just speculate about what it would be like to not have these things, and not just to criticize the shortcomings of particular examples in an otherwise effective criminal justice system, but to really think very critically about issues such as racism, sexism, and the death penalty, just to name a few, that are practiced completely differently and have a very different cultural perception in different areas of the world, based on whether they have a rule of law or not. Many of you are used to getting graded in one of two ways. The first way is an accumulation of points. Let's imagine that the course was 100 points and you got 90, that would give you an A. But if you get 60, that's a D. Another way that you might be used to taking your classes is by having papers or some other form of subjective grading, where a general question is asked and you do your best to take all the things that you've learned from the class and represent them to the professor in the way that he or she expects. I'm giving you a third way of grading. If you look at the graph or table right in front of you, the top numbers 4, 3, 2, and 1 represent general areas of students who perform in those categories. They usually get a 4, which is almost always an A+, a 3, which is somewhere between an A and an A+, a 2, which tends to be around a C+ and above, and a 1, which usually means it's a D or an F, but what I like to call it needs revision. You've been asked, according to the course goals, to analyze participants' procedures and steps of the American legal system in order to understand the rule of law and the consequences without it. What I've done is show you what each student does, whether they're a 1, 2, 3, or 4, that shows me what grade they should get. So for example, when you analyze different issues within the legal system and you want to get an A+, you have to be able to show me that you can distinguish between facts and inferences in a matter that systematically breaks down content. What this means is usually grades that don't get an A+ are either because they lack a framework that shows me that you're separating facts and inferences, or that you aren't really sure what the difference between facts and inferences are. It's important that you take an active role in assessing yourself. That's why I've provided this graph ahead of time, so that you can think about what level of grading you think you should get, and be able to prepare yourself and show me through your coursework and on the final that you get the grade that you want. In other words, you should be able to do exactly the things that this graph tells you, whether you want a 3, which is anywhere from a B+ to an A, an A+, which is a 4, or something underneath that. It's important that we be realistic, but that we set our expectations high. If you have any questions about this rubric, please feel free to email me, as this is important for you to get the grade that you deserve. part of this class has been one option you could do was community mapping for your civic engagement. This has been a consistent option over the last 2 years, and students have mapped their communities in different ways. I encourage the free expression and creative ideas that are shown in that first picture above. This represents a community as the ideal. It gives us a sense of what is important and what's not. It also expands our ideas beyond just what we understand with technology. The one below is the one that we're creating online, very similar to Google Maps, in the hope that this will help people be more aware of the services that are in their areas, as well as ensuring that everyone gets equal access in those communities. Finally, I hope that this experience, frustrating at times, but in the world of digital globalization, we often find things extremely frustrating, that the future truly is interactive, digital, and that we must learn in order to be able to compete with other jobs in any sector in the future. I've provided some examples of how this is affecting us directly, but I wanted to make sure that you feel more confident after learning to master parts of technology that before class you had expressed some reservation about. Please let me know how we can improve this course, as this is an ongoing process and you are integral to the success of this project. Thank you and good luck.